Hello everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today for another English listening practice session. Today we're going to work on a technique called shadowing. Shadowing is when you listen to English and repeat what you hear at the same time. This technique has amazing benefits for your English learning. It helps you improve your pronunciation, your listening comprehension, and your speaking fluency all at once. As we go through today's story, I encourage you to pause after each sentence and try to repeat it out loud. Don't worry about being perfect. The goal is to practice and improve gradually. Are you ready? Let's dive into the story.
My name is Susan Parker. I am 28 years old. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. For the past 6 years, I have been studying to become a doctor. This has been my dream since I was 10 years old. I thought I knew exactly what my future would look like until 3 weeks ago. Something happened during my residency at Boston General Hospital that changed everything I believed about medicine and about myself. I was working the night shift in the emergency department when I saw something that should have been impossible. Something that made me question not just my career choice, but the very nature of healing itself. I have always been a logical person. I believe in science and facts. I trust what I can see and measure. My professors have always praised me for my analytical mind and steady hands. They said I would make an excellent surgeon. But that night in the emergency room, logic failed me completely. I was treating a 7-year-old boy named Tommy who had been brought in after a bicycle accident. He had a deep cut on his arm that needed stitches. His parents were terrified. The boy was crying and bleeding heavily. I prepared to clean the wound and begin stitching. I had done this procedure hundreds of times during my training. It was routine work for me. I felt confident and prepared. But when I touched Tommy's arm, something extraordinary happened. The moment my hands made contact with his skin, I felt a strange warmth spreading through my fingers. The sensation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It felt like electricity, but gentle and healing rather than shocking. Tommy stopped crying immediately. His eyes widened and he looked directly at me with curiosity instead of fear. His parents noticed the change too. The panic in the room seemed to dissolve. I looked down at Tommy's wound and gasped. The bleeding had stopped completely. The edges of the cut were already beginning to heal. Within minutes, the deep gash had closed to a thin line that barely needed 1 stitch instead of the 15 I had planned. I stepped away from the table, my hands shaking. I told myself it was adrenaline or a trick of the hospital lighting. I convinced myself that I had misjudged the severity of the wound. There had to be a medical explanation. But deep inside, I knew something impossible had just happened. Tommy's parents were amazed by his quick recovery. They thanked me repeatedly and said they had never seen a doctor with such gentle healing hands. The boy hugged me before they left and whispered, "You made the pain go away just by touching me." After they left, I sat in the break room trying to process what had occurred. I reviewed Tommy's medical chart multiple times. The initial assessment clearly documented a severe laceration requiring extensive suturing. Yet the boy had healed almost instantly under my touch. I decided not to tell anyone about the incident. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself. I assumed it was a one-time occurrence, a strange coincidence that would never happen again. But I was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, similar incidents began happening with increasing frequency. Every patient I touched seemed to heal faster than normal. Broken bones mended in days instead of weeks. Infections cleared up overnight. Pain disappeared within minutes of contact with my hands. At first, I attributed these recoveries to excellent medical care and positive thinking. I told myself that my patients were responding well to conventional treatment. I refused to consider any other explanation. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. My supervising physician, Dr. Martinez, began to notice the unusual recovery rates among my patients. She called me into her office last Friday morning and showed me a statistical analysis of patient outcomes. According to the hospital's data, patients under my care were healing at rates that defied medical explanation. My success rate was not just above average, it was statistically impossible according to established medical research. Dr. Martinez asked me directly if I had any explanation for these extraordinary results. She was concerned that I might be administering unauthorized treatments or failing to document procedures properly. I told her I was simply following standard medical protocols. I could not explain the unusual healing rates. I suggested that perhaps I had been assigned patients with particularly strong immune systems. Dr. Martinez looked skeptical. She informed me that the hospital administration wanted to conduct a formal review of my cases. She said they were considering whether to recommend me for early graduation based on my exceptional results. That weekend, I decided to research my family history for any clues about what was happening to me. My parents had died in a house fire when I was 16. I had been raised by my elderly grandmother, who had passed away 2 years ago. I had very few family documents, but I found a small wooden box among my grandmother's belongings that I had never opened. Inside were old letters, photographs, and medical records dating back several generations. One document immediately caught my attention. It was a letter written by my great-great-grandmother in 1892. She described having unusual abilities to help sick people in her rural community in Ireland. The letter mentioned that she could heal with her hands, and that people would travel great distances to seek her help. She wrote that this gift had been passed down through the women in our family for centuries. According to the letter, my great-great-grandmother had emigrated to America because the local priest had accused her of witchcraft. She had been forced to hide her abilities and live as an ordinary person to avoid persecution. I found more documents that mentioned similar abilities in other female relatives. My great-grandmother had worked as a midwife and was known for her exceptional success in difficult births. My grandmother had been a nurse during World War II and had an unusually high survival rate among her patients. The pattern was clear. This healing ability had been present in my family for generations, but each woman had kept it secret to protect herself and her family. I realized that my desire to become a doctor had not been random. I had been drawn to medicine because of an inherited gift that I was only now beginning to understand. The following Monday, I returned to the hospital with a new perspective on my abilities. Instead of fighting or denying what was happening, I decided to observe and learn from each healing experience. I began keeping detailed notes about the sensations I felt when touching patients. I documented the correlation between my emotional state and the strength of the healing effects. I started to recognize patterns in how different types of injuries responded to my touch. I discovered that the healing worked best when I was calm, focused, and genuinely caring about the patient's well-being. Stress, fatigue, and doubt seemed to diminish the effect. The connection required not just physical contact, but emotional presence and intention to help. During my shift that week, I encountered Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman with advanced arthritis who had been suffering from chronic pain for years. Her condition was considered incurable by conventional medicine. She could barely move her fingers and had lost most function in her hands. I spent extra time with Mrs. Chen, holding her hands while we talked about her family and her life in China. As we spoke, I felt the familiar warmth flowing through my palms. Mrs. Chen's expression slowly changed from pain to wonder. By the end of our session, Mrs. Chen could move her fingers freely for the first time in decades. She showed me how she could make a fist and bend her wrists without discomfort. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she demonstrated her restored mobility. Mrs. Chen asked me how I had performed such a miracle. I told her that I had simply held her hands and listened to her stories. I said that sometimes healing comes from human connection and caring attention. She looked at me with knowing eyes and said, "You have the gift, child. I have seen it before in my homeland. You must learn to use it wisely." That evening, I called my mentor from medical school, Dr. Sarah Williams. She had always been supportive of my unconventional questions and my interest in the mind-body connection in healing. I told Dr. Williams about the unusual patient outcomes and my family history. I asked her opinion about alternative healing methods and whether she had encountered similar phenomena in her practice. Dr. Williams listened carefully to my story. She told me that she had met a few practitioners over the years who seemed to have extraordinary healing abilities. She said that modern medicine was only beginning to understand the complex relationships between touch, intention, and physical recovery. She advised me to continue my medical training while exploring this gift privately. She warned me that the medical establishment was not ready to accept abilities that could not be scientifically explained or replicated in controlled studies. Dr. Williams also told me about a research institute in California that studied unusual healing phenomena. She said they might be interested in documenting my experiences if I ever decided to come forward publicly. Over the next week, I continued working with patients while secretly developing my healing abilities. I learned to control the intensity of the energy flowing through my hands. I practiced focusing my intention on specific areas of injury or illness. I helped a young mother heal from postpartum depression by holding her hands during our conversations. I assisted an elderly man in recovering from pneumonia by placing my palms on his chest while he slept. I watched a teenage girl's severe acne clear up after I gently touched her face while explaining proper skincare. Each successful healing filled me with a sense of purpose I had never experienced during conventional medical training. I realized that I could help people in ways that went far beyond what I had learned in textbooks and classrooms. But I also began to understand the enormous responsibility that came with this gift. People's lives and well-being would depend on my ability to use these powers wisely and ethically. Last Thursday, Dr. Martinez called me into her office again. She had the results of the formal review conducted by the hospital administration. She said they had never seen anything like my patient outcomes in the history of the institution. Dr. Martinez offered me an immediate position as a resident physician, bypassing the final months of my training. She said the hospital wanted to study my methods and potentially incorporate them into their standard treatment protocols. I thanked Dr. Martinez for the opportunity, but I asked for time to consider the offer. I told her I needed to make an important decision about the direction of my career. That night, I sat in my apartment reading more of my great-great-grandmother's letters. She had written about the joy of helping people heal, but also about the isolation and fear that came with possessing abilities others could not understand. She described having to choose between using her gift openly and living safely in conventional society. She had chosen safety for the sake of her children, but she had always regretted not being able to help as many people as she could have. I realized that I faced the same choice she had made over a century ago. I could continue with traditional medical training and hide my healing abilities, or I could find a way to use my gift more openly, despite the risks. I decided to contact the research institute in California that Dr. Williams had mentioned. I wanted to learn more about others who had similar abilities and how they had chosen to use their gifts. The institute was very interested in my experiences. They invited me to visit their facility and participate in controlled studies of my healing abilities. They said they were working with several practitioners who had documented unusual healing powers. Dr. Jennifer Ross, the Institute's director, explained that they were trying to understand the scientific basis for energy healing and therapeutic touch. She said my medical training would be valuable in helping them bridge the gap between conventional and alternative healing methods. The Institute offered me a research position where I could continue developing my healing abilities while working with scientists to document and understand the phenomena. They said I could help establish protocols for training other practitioners and integrating energy healing into mainstream medicine. This opportunity represented everything I had not known I was looking for. I could use my gift to help people while contributing to scientific understanding of healing. I would not have to hide my abilities or pretend they did not exist. Yesterday, I made my final decision. I called Dr. Martinez and respectfully declined the hospital position. I told her I had been accepted into a specialized research program that would allow me to explore innovative healing methods. I also called my medical school and explained that I would be taking a different path than traditional practice. My professors were surprised, but they supported my decision to pursue research in healing methodologies. Tomorrow, I will fly to California to begin my new life as a healer researcher. I am excited and nervous about this unknown future, but I know it is the right choice for me. I have learned that sometimes our true calling is not what we originally planned. Sometimes we discover abilities and purposes that we never knew existed. Sometimes the most important decision is to trust the gifts we have been given, even when they lead us away from conventional paths. I wanted to be a doctor to help people heal. Now I understand that there are many different ways to achieve that goal. My path may be unusual, but it is authentically mine. As I pack my belongings tonight, I am carrying my great-great-grandmother's letters with me. Her courage to use her gifts, despite the risks, has inspired me to embrace my own abilities fully.
If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment and tell me what you thought about Susan's incredible discovery and her brave decision. Your engagement helps other English learners find these stories and improve their language skills together.